John Miller sat motionless in his Mercedes, watching the strange blue glow through the dense forest rain. At 65, he'd seen many peculiar things in his business career, but nothing like this. Thunder cracked overhead as he stepped out, his expensive shoes sinking into the mud. The glow pulsed brighter between the trees, drawing him deeper into the woods. His heart pounded, part fear, part curiosity. He should turn back, call someone, but something pushed him forward. Then he saw her. A young girl, maybe 12, crouched beneath a massive oak. She clutched a crystal-like object emitting that otherworldly blue light. Her clothes were unlike anything he'd seen, shimmering material that seemed to shift colors in the rain. She looked up at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. When she spoke, the words were melodic but completely foreign to his ears. John reached out his hand, remembering how his late wife always said he had a good heart despite his stern business demeanor. The girl hesitated, studying him intently. The crystal in her hands pulsed brighter, and somehow John knew, this moment would change everything. His lonely life caring for his disabled mother in their mansion, his rigid routines, his careful plans, nothing would be the same after tonight. Lightning illuminated the forest as their hands met. The crystal's glow enveloped them both, and in that instant, John felt something he hadn't experienced since his wife's passing, hope. He had no idea he'd just become entangled in something far bigger than himself, a mystery that would challenge everything he believed about reality, family, and the true meaning of wealth. The grand gates of Miller Estate creaked open as John's car pulled in, his unusual passenger silent in the back seat. Rain still drummed on the roof as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl sat perfectly still, the strange crystal now dim in her lap. His Victorian mansion loomed ahead, warm lights glowing from the first-floor windows where his mother would be waiting in her wheelchair. Martha, his mother's caregiver, usually left at 8, he'd have to explain this situation himself. "Home," he said slowly, pointing to the house. The girl nodded, surprising him. Perhaps she understood more than she could speak. Inside, his mother Rose sat by the fireplace, her silver hair neatly combed, wheelchair positioned to face the entrance. At 85, she'd been confined to it for 3 years after her stroke. Her eyes widened at the sight of the rain-soaked pair. "John?" Her voice trembled. "Who is this child?" Before he could answer, the girl stepped forward. The crystal pulsed once, and Rose gasped. The girl reached out, touching Rose's hand gently. For a moment, John swore he saw that blue glow pass between them. "My word," Rose whispered, her hand trembling. "I can feel my fingers tingling." John watched in amazement as his mother flexed her fingers, something she hadn't done since her stroke. The girl smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. That night, as John prepared the guest room, he heard his mother humming from her room, another thing she'd stopped doing years ago. The girl stood at her window, looking at the stars through a break in the clouds. "What's your name?" he tried asking again. She turned, speaking in that melodic language. Though he couldn't understand the words, one seemed to repeat, "Aria." As he closed her door, John noticed the houseplants in the hallway, previously wilting despite the gardener's care, had begun to bloom. Outside, thunder rumbled again, but somehow the night felt full of possibility rather than threat. In his study, John picked up his phone several times to call the authorities. Each time, he set it down again. Something told him that would be a terrible mistake. Instead, he opened his laptop and began researching unexplained phenomena in the area, missing children reports, anything that might explain his mysterious guest. The crystal's glow pulsed softly from under her door, and somewhere in the house, his mother laughed, a sound he hadn't heard in years. John Miller, who'd built his fortune on always making the logical choice, decided that tonight, logic could wait. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the windows as Aria, that's what they'd decided to call her, sat at the breakfast table. 2 weeks had passed since that stormy night. John watched in amazement as she carefully mimicked his mother's pronunciation. "Tea," Rose said slowly, holding up her cup. Her right hand was steady now, another miracle that had appeared since Arya's arrival. "Tea," Arya repeated perfectly. Her English was improving rapidly. Each day brought new words, though she still spoke in her musical language when excited. The crystal sat on the windowsill, its glow dimmer in daylight. Strange things happened around it, houseplants flourished, broken clocks started working, and most remarkably, Rose's health improved daily. She could now move her fingers and arms, something doctors had said would be impossible. But not everything was peaceful. Last night, John noticed a black SUV parked outside their gates. This morning, unusual interference disrupted their phones and internet. Someone was watching. "Father," Arya said suddenly, making John spill his coffee. It was the first time she'd called him that. "They're coming." Before he could ask who, a sharp knock echoed through the mansion. Through the security camera, John saw two men in dark suits at the door. Government badges glinted in the morning sun. "Mr. Miller," the taller one called out. "We're from the Department of Special Investigations. We need to discuss the unusual energy signatures we've detected from your property." Rose gripped Arya's hand tightly. The crystal pulsed once, and the security system flickered. "Back door," Arya whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Like her." She pointed to a photo of John's late wife on the wall. John understood. His wife had always said the heart knows what's right, even when logic disagrees. These men might have badges, but his instincts screamed danger. As the knocking grew louder, John made a decision that would change everything. He helped Rose from her chair, she could stand now, another miracle, and led them toward the garden door. Behind them, the crystal's glow intensified, and suddenly every electronic device in the house went dark. They had minutes, at most, before those doors would come down. The wealthy businessman who'd spent his life following rules was about to become a fugitive, all to protect a mysterious child who'd brought hope back into their lives. As they hurried through the garden, Arya looked back at him and smiled, the same knowing smile she'd worn that first night in the rain. The first hints of autumn colored the mountain hideaway where John, Rose, and Arya had taken refuge. 3 months had passed since their escape from the mansion. The old hunting cabin, bought under a false name years ago for its privacy, had become their sanctuary. Rose sat on the porch, knitting, her hands now as nimble as in her youth. The transformation in her health continued to amaze John. She could walk short distances, and her speech was clearer than it had been in years. Inside, Arya worked on her English by reading old novels they'd brought. The crystal sat beside her, its glow synchronizing with her breathing. She looked up suddenly. "They found us," she said quietly. John's heart sank. They'd been careful, cash only, no phones, minimal trips to town. But he'd known they couldn't hide forever. Through the trees, he spotted the now familiar black SUVs winding up the mountain road. But something was different this time. The crystal pulsed rapidly, and Arya smiled. "Not the dark ones," she said. "My people." A soft humming filled the air. Through the cabin windows, John watched as 3 figures emerged from the forest, their clothes similar to what Arya had worn that first night. The crystal glowed brighter than ever. The leader, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, spoke in Arya's musical language. Arya responded, tears streaming down her face. Then, to John's surprise, the woman switched to perfect English. "Mr. Miller, we cannot thank you enough for protecting our scout." The truth began to unfold. Their civilization had been watching Earth, searching for proof that humans could accept difference with compassion rather than fear. Arya, their youngest explorer, was sent as a test, not just of humanity's kindness, but of their readiness for contact. The government agents hunting them weren't after Arya for study, they wanted to prevent any evidence of extraterrestrial contact from reaching the public. They weren't ready for the truth. As night fell over the mountain, John realized their sanctuary had become something far more significant, the birthplace of humanity's first peaceful contact with another civilization. A soft blue glow bathed the cabin's main room as Arya sat cross-legged, the crystal floating inches above her palms. John and Rose watched in wonder as images formed in the light, glimpses of her world. Towering crystal cities, flying vehicles that moved silently through pristine skies, and people working in harmony with technology beyond human imagination. "Our world was like yours once," the silver-haired woman, who called herself Elder Lyra, explained. "We faced the same challenges: environmental crisis, social division, fear of difference. We learned to overcome them through unity and understanding. But their peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of helicopters. The government had found them. Through the windows, searchlights swept the forest. The crystal's glow intensified, creating a protective dome around the cabin. They cannot be allowed to interfere," Elder Lyra said firmly. "The connection has already begun." John watched in amazement as Rose stood up without assistance, walking to Arya's side. The crystal's light seemed to flow through them both. Outside, the helicopter's engines sputtered and died, forced to land by some invisible force. "Your kindness proved humanity's potential," Elder Lyra continued. "But now we face a choice. The government forces will not stop hunting us. We can take Arya back to safety, or..." She paused, looking meaningfully at John and Rose. "You could come with us. Learn our ways. Become a bridge between our worlds." The sound of vehicles approaching echoed through the trees. Time was running out. John looked at his mother, expecting fear, but saw only peaceful certainty in her eyes. "Sometimes the greatest adventures begin in the twilight of life," he thought, taking Rose's hand as the crystal's light grew to fill the room. The silver-streaked elder smiled as several more of Arya's people emerged from the dense forest. The crystal's protective dome now encompassed the entire clearing, keeping the approaching government forces at bay. Inside, the air hummed with energy. "Your world has healing powers we've only dreamed of," John said, watching his mother move with the grace of someone decades younger. "But why choose us?" "The crystal responds to pure intentions," Elder Lyra explained. "It led Arya to you that night because your heart, despite life's hardships, remained open to wonder. Your mother's soul shines with wisdom earned through suffering. Together, you represent humanity's potential." Beyond the dome, black-clad figures had surrounded the clearing, their weapons useless against the shimmering barrier. Radios crackled with confused chatter as every electronic device within range failed. Arya stood between John and Rose, taking their hands. The crystal pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Through its light, John saw flashes of possibility, Earth and Arya's world working together, sharing knowledge, healing ancient wounds. "The bridge between worlds," Rose whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. "It's not just about technology, is it? It's about love. About family." The crystal flared brighter in response, and for a moment, everyone in the clearing, even the frustrated government agents outside, felt a wave of profound peace wash over them. A decision lay before them, and the night held its breath, waiting. Inside the crystal's protective dome, time seemed to slow. John watched as more of Arya's people emerged from shimmering portals, their advanced technology now fully revealed. The government forces outside stood frozen, weapons lowered, as waves of peaceful energy radiated from the clearing. "There will be others like you," Elder Lyra explained. "Hidden across Earth, more families are being chosen. Small bridges building toward a greater connection. But you were the first to earn our trust completely." Rose reached for the crystal, her hands steady and sure. As she touched it, decades of pain and limitation melted away. "Not just healing, but transformation. We'll be leaving everything behind," she said softly. Not everything, Arya replied, her English now perfect. We're taking the most important thing, our family. The crystal pulsed one final time, and the dome began to expand. John saw the government agents' expressions change from hostility to wonder. Some lowered their weapons, tears streaming down their faces as understanding washed over them. They'll remember this night, Elder Lyra said. Not as a threat, but as a promise. Earth isn't ready for full contact, but they'll know it's possible. That kindness opens doors technology cannot. John took one last look at the cabin where they'd hidden, at the Earth he'd known. Then he turned to his new family, his mother standing tall, Arya beaming with joy, and their new friends from across the stars. The crystal's light enveloped them completely, and as they departed, they left behind not fear or confusion, but hope. Hope that someday soon, humanity would be ready for the greatest journey of all, the journey toward universal understanding. Far below, the agents watched the light fade, forever changed by what they'd witnessed. In the coming years, they would question their mission, their methods, their assumptions about power and control. And somewhere among the stars, a wealthy businessman who'd lost his way found something far greater than success. He found purpose. The end wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the beginning of humanity's next great adventure. With the starship's crystal technology, John, Rose, and Arya found their new home among the stars. Their living quarters resembled a blend of Earth comfort and advanced alien design, walls that shifted colors with their moods, windows that could show any view across the galaxy. Rose's transformation was complete. Not just her health, but her spirit soared in this new environment. She spent hours in the ship's vast gardens, learning about plants that could heal entire worlds. The wisdom of age combined with renewed vitality made her a respected voice among their new community. John discovered his business skills had an unexpected value. He helped bridge cultural gaps, teaching their hosts about human nature while learning their ways of sustainable progress. His logical mind found peace in their society's perfect balance of technology and compassion. Arya blossomed as their guide and daughter. She took them through the ship's learning centers, where they studied the history of countless civilizations. Each day brought new wonders, anti-gravity chambers, teleportation gates, and technology that could create anything they imagined. But their greatest joy came from helping other chosen families adjust. Each newcomer brought unique gifts, building a community that would someday help Earth take its first steps toward the stars. One evening, watching a distant nebula through their window, John realized something profound. True wealth wasn't in his abandoned bank accounts or empty mansion. It was here, in the love of his restored mother, his adopted alien daughter, and the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. Their story became legend among both worlds, the wealthy man who found riches beyond measure by following his heart, the mother whose love transcended physical limitations, and the mysterious girl who brought them all together. And somewhere on Earth, in a forest clearing touched by crystal light, new stories were just beginning.